The Last Clue is a production of Smith Media Team, LLC.
So it looks like we have another cold case solved and in the books in Iowa.
We have a charge.
We do.
Now it's got a stick.
Yes, we have an arrest and a charge in the disappearance of a young mom from Iowa named Barbara Lenz. She went missing on May 6th of 1989.
Almost 36 years.
Almost 36 years.
And
So,
and we're just now getting to the boyfriend who was the last person to see her in the first place.
that just kind of goes to show you how far technology has come in these years, as well as the introduction and or reintroduction, if necessary, of the cold case units. Funding was in place for one in Iowa several years ago. The funding ran out.
The grant ran
The
out.
grant ran out, and it had been reinstated. So
And
these are very important.
not to get political, but that's something that we're dealing with right now in this day and time is we're talking about federal defunding. And when you get to stories like this, when you get down to the brass tacks of it all, this really shows you how this affects families and people and loved ones, because we had a cold case unit on this case and then it got defunded, and then now we get this back, and now we have a charge in almost a 36-year-old.
And this is not the first one. We did another podcast on the lady out of Traverse City, Michigan. It was the same thing, cold case unit, back in action, case solved. So here we are again, now almost 36 years later. Barbara Lenz's murderer has been arrested and charged
With first degree murder.
with first degree murder.
And and I'd like to just briefly give thanks to the Iowa Attorney General, Brenna Bird,
Yes.
who launched this Iowa cold case unit back in July.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really know the specifics of what the cold case crew has been able to do since July, but this is a huge breakthrough because, again, this is 36 years of a family and loved ones' lives that may finally get closure. She's got a daughter that has 3 children.
Yes, at the time of Barbara's disappearance, her daughter was 3 years old, little Lindsay. And it's sad. You've got a child that grew up without a mother, who is now a mother herself. And I'm sure she's feeling all the feels right now, maybe some relief and probably still some sorrow and going through all of the emotions because she's never been able to fully grieve because she's never had closure.
And I've checked all the local pages and all the chat blogs and everything else. There are a lot of people in this area of Iowa that think that that was one of the main catalysts as to why this murder happened in the first place. Barbara was trying to meet up with her ex-husband,
Ex-boyfriend, yes.
ex-boyfriend, because they had their 3-year-old daughter together. And this guy, Robert Davis, who was the current boyfriend, who she was already afraid of.
Right.
There had already been issues that we'll get into in just a moment, but there had already been issues with this guy, and I'm not even going to call him Mr. Robert Davis did not want Barbara to go meet up with the ex-boyfriend to exchange the child because he was a jealous prick. And an abusive prick at that. But again,
Yes.
We'll get into that.
So let's get into the meat and potatoes. So Barbara went missing 35 years ago after trying to make plans to head to Omaha to drop off little Lindsay to her ex-boyfriend, who was Lindsay's father. Her boyfriend at the time said Robert Davis did not want that to happen. He never wanted that to happen at any of the points and times where they had to have these exchanges. Robert and Barbara lived together, from what I gather, and he had some history of abuse with Barbara and after Barbara. So Barbara disappears, and he seems to be one of those that is, I use the air quotes because we are not on video. He was one of those that was out looking for her.
He's 61 now. He was living in
He,
Council Bluffs the whole time.
yeah,
Or most of the time anyway. He was right there. He got arrested after this.
yes, he did. He got arrested after Barbara disappeared. Initially, it was, I guess, what you would call cooperative at the time and then at some point became uncooperative. Uh, this one just baffles me how he was literally hiding in plain sight. They had him in their hands. They had him in their hands. Why was he not arrested and charged back then?
Barbara said in the complaint that he choked her down during several different occasions when they would get into fights because he was a jealous prick. And I hope he's listening. He was a jealous prick.
Well, he doesn't have a lot to do in prison, so hopefully this is one of the things that they get to do.
And this is how valuable, again, a cold case unit, when funded and ran properly. And I'm going to go off on a little bit of a rant here. I don't mean to disparage Barbara Lenz or her family or anybody else. I promise I do not. But I'm going to go off on just a little bit of a tangent here. We did a podcast not long ago where I got very, very wound up. And as a matter of fact, I called out the then director of the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation.
You did?
Angela Spurlock, who's now no longer with the agency because she was a piece of trash and didn't do her damn job. And now she has stepped down, taken early retirement. She was out March 1st, thank God, because she didn't do anything. She was under investigation all the time. She's a piece of trash. And if anybody knows Angela Spurlock and she wants to go one-on-one with me, name the time and the place and I'll be there. But that goes back to Angela Spurlock being a piece of trash at the OSBI with all of the cold cases, all of the unsolved murders in Oklahoma. She had one of the most famous ones sitting in the palm of her hand with the Karen Silkwood case that we covered in detail on this podcast. And she sat on her ass and did nothing. I'm sorry. Just had to get that off my chest because, again, the OSBI and the Oklahoma City Police Department need to be investigated for that case. Luckily, I'm not doing the same thing here because in Iowa, they did the right thing and they funded a cold case crew and got this case. They at least got a charge in the case.
They did. And I mean, Robert Davis even admitted way back then that he had assaulted Barbara. He has a violent temper. And they let him go. He always said he had a violent temper when things went wrong with Barbara. And he admitted to law enforcement back then that he assaulted her, not only her, but her daughter in a restaurant in front of several witnesses. And then he went and pushed Barbara around that same day. So, in any case, this guy is finally behind bars after several witnesses saw him cut her, push her around, choke her out, and beating Barbara. Well, and then obviously murdering her.
What bothers me about this is back in '06, we had some mushroom hunters in the area that
Near Davis's residence out in the woods, I think.
pretty close. And this was in Council Bluffs, where Davis was living at the time of his arrest. And they found a 55-gallon barrel while they were out hunting mushrooms, which is not uncommon. And they found skeletal remains inside. And everybody in the world just about thought that it was Barbara Lenz. They thought that they had finally solved this back in '06. There was hope. There was a glimmer of light in this case.
Because where there's a body, there's a murder.
And what turns out is it not only wasn't her, but it turned out that it was connected to another case, and that would be Thomas Tomich. Thomas Tomich. He is the ex-husband of 28-year-old Lois Tomich, who was believed to be murdered. And when they finally figured out that this wasn't Barbara Lenz, they turned their attention elsewhere, figured out that this was Lois Tomich, and then
the good old dental records.
Yeah. Well, there wasn't a whole lot, because that 55-gallon barrel was about 3/4 full of concrete. And so
I believe it was the dental records that proved it wasn't Barbara Lenz, so it led to a Lois.
So we went from one murder in '06 that should have led investigators to light a fire under the Barbara Lenz case, because they thought that this barrel was finally going to solve that case. It didn't, but it helped identify someone from another case. That should have lit the fire for the Lenz case, and I really feel like it should have been solved sooner because of the way that all of the dominoes fell. But irregardless, it's 2025. We have someone charged for the Barbara Lenz murder. It looks to be pretty solid. Yes. I'm sure what's going to happen is, I don't know this guy from Adam, but he's probably going to tell investigators that he can lead them to the body.
I hope so.
And he's going to get a reduced sentence because of it. I don't necessarily agree with that, but it does give closure to the family. I think in those certain cases that should be that should be the judge's call. The defense attorney can go to the judge and say, listen, my client led you to the body. It gave the family closure. We're asking for a reduced sentence. And the judge should say, fuck you.
Yeah.
You're a murderer. You've been convicted in court. You've been convicted by a jury of your peers. You've been convicted by me. Whoever convicted you, you should go in front of the firing squad. If this is what happened, and you're found guilty of this murder beyond a shadow of a doubt, go in front of the firing squad. We just had that not too long ago.
Yeah, South Carolina.
So,
I believe. But Robert Davis is finally behind bars, charged first-degree murder in the disappearance and death of Barbara Lenz, which should have happened 35 years ago. Shouldn't have taken so long. But her daughter, Lindsay, she's in a state of grief, but she also did state she's grateful to the DCI and cold case investigators. It's very surreal. I'm grateful for the unit. I never thought this day would come. It is honestly something that I've waited for my whole life, is what she stated.
Like I said, I hope this brings a little bit of closure to her daughter and their family. But almost 36 years is a long time. It's a long time for a family to sit and wait and wonder about what happened, how it happened, if it was, there's a lot of things that'll go through your mind, and
Hopefully, they'll get those answers during trial. And 36 years is literally a lifetime. It's more of a lifetime than Barbara had.
I don't think they will. I think this guy's a coward. I think he's a cheap shot artist. I don't. I I do I do agree with their daughter a little bit. One of the stories I read, she said she was hopeful that someday someone close to their deathbed would come forward with information. I do think at some point he probably will confess completely, but I don't think it's going to be now, unless unless he has some terminal illness that we don't know about, or he's at the end of his days health wise for some other reason, whether it's drugs, alcohol, whatever, just genetics in general. I don't think this is the type of person that's going to give you a confession in court. He's going to wait. um, he may wait until the last time he sees the chaplain in prison to confess. That's the kind of coward that we're talking about here.
Well, I'm glad he's behind bars, and I'm glad there's some resolution at this point in time for Barbara's family.
I am too. Now we'll wait and see what happens in court. But like I said, I would be willing to bet that he will lead investigators to an area where Barbara's body is. Barbara's body will be found. He'll get a reduced sentence, and he'll spend the rest of his life hopefully in jail, if not um, something more drastic.
Well, good riddance to Robert Davis.
The Last Clue is a production of Smith Media Team, LLC. If you know of a case or have any information about the cases that we've covered, please email us at info@smithmediateam.com.